Bronze fans, it's Jordan Jackson, and I'm joined again by Jim Gilchrist. Jim, it's been a long time. It's good to see you again.
Hey, fantastic here, Jordan. Nice to meet you here too.
I'm sure our fans have noticed that over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking back on some of the great franchise memories. And, the downside is we don't have any hockey games to play right now, but the positive side of that is that we get to look back at some of these great experiences. We're going to do a little bit of a different take this week and do it in video form rather than article form. A little easier to, listen to a video in the background while people work away on their laptops or whatever. So we're going to try this, see how it goes. And if we like it, we'll keep going with it. And if not, I can always write some more articles, right? So
I can hear the fans' reaction now. Let's go back to just the writing, okay? We don't want to look at him every time.
Well, then they don't have to see our faces, I guess, right? So. So, Jim, we've been looking back at some of the great teams that the Canadians and the Frontenacs have had. We're going to take a little bit of a different spin this week. And, I think this is kind of your way of showing thanks to some of the people that you've worked with over the years. You wanted to talk about your color commentators and the guys that have joined you in the booth through your time calling Kingston Frontenacs and Kingston Canadians games. So, last week we talked about the 80-81 Canadians, and you mentioned that was your first year, and you briefly brought up Chris Cuthbert as the first guy that joined you in the booth. Obviously, that's a big name in the industry now, so can you tell us a little bit about Chris and what he was like that year with you in the booth?
You see the start that I gave for him. Boy, he's really done some pretty good things. He's been pretty busy over the last few years. On NHL and TSN, of course, with the CFL, but great kid. And at that time, he was just working part-time at the TV station. He did the late night TV sports, and he was going to Queens. And he and his wife, Diane, were just living here at that time. And he did a great job as my color commentator there. You could tell that this kid had just a great future. And the next year, he went to a radio station in Montreal. And I think the year after that was when he ended up at TSN. So it just took off right from there for him.
Of course, he would have been a pretty young kid at that time. So what did you see? Like, we talked about Kirk Muller last year playing at just 14, or last week, I should say, playing at just 14, and what you saw in him at that age. So as a guy who has been in this industry for as long as you have now, what did you see in Chris at such a young age that did you know he was going to get to the point he's at today?
Maybe not as far as he did here today, but certainly that was his goal, and boy, nothing was going to stop him, and that was pretty well it. At that time, he and his wife didn't have any kids at that time, so he was pretty loose with his time at that time. So, but he had the aim of getting someday to the NHL, and boy, he sure did that along with the CFL, of course. So he knew what he wanted to do, and boy, he sure has done it over the years. Got together with him just a few years ago here when he had a book out, and he was doing a book venture around the country, and he stopped into Kingston there, and we had a good chat for a couple of hours there one night. So great to see him, what he's done there. He sure deserved everything that he got.
Funny that he started with the Kingston Canadians, and you mentioned the following season moved to the Montreal Canadiens. Was that just a coincidence, or was there some connection there at the time?
I think so. Yeah, he was a Leaf fan. Nothing wrong with that. Thank you very much. So Montreal, ironically enough, that was kind of the ironic part of all that. So, but I think it was just a coincidence that he did end up there in Montreal.
Of course, that was only for one season. Your first year, you're with Chris, and then he goes off to Montreal. So you get a new tag team partner up in the booth, and that's Mark Potter, someone that's going to be a very familiar name to Kingston fans and people in the Kingston region. Of course, he was a sports director at CKWS at the time. Many people now know him as the curator of the International Hockey Hall of Fame, also a member of the Kingston and District Sports Hall of Fame. So, he's been involved with the hockey scene in the area for a long time, and he was a part of your broadcast for many years.
Yeah, he was my color commentator for about 3 or 4 years there in the mid 80s or so. I took up after Chris left, so from 81 to 82. And right through until I think about 83, 84 or so, Mark was my color commentator then. Voiced his opinion on a lot of things, and some of the guys on the team and coaches and everybody didn't appreciate some of the comments he came out with, but he told it as it was sometimes, and he wasn't afraid to hold back either with the Canadians or my Leafs. He cut up my Leafs really bad. So But then he lost a bet one time and he had to go on air with his hair dyed blue because I think the Leafs won a playoff series that year. So he ended up losing that bet. So he had to go on and do a sportscast with his hair dyed blue. So served him right.
Sounds like not a lot has changed for Mark. Still very opinionated and passionate about his opinion, and nothing wrong with that. Just not always going to get people that agree with you. That's the only thing, right?
And the first of these next three guys that we're talking about here are all in the Kingston District Hall of Fame. So next two were already there, mind you, when they were working with me on air. But Mark just got in here over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. So you said Mark was there for about 3 or 4 years. And then this must have been a big thrill for you as a Leafs fan, because your next partner was Jim Dory, the former Toronto Maple Leaf, of course, also a member of the Kingston District Hall of Fame, as you mentioned. But what was it like being a Leafs fan, sitting beside a guy who played for the Leafs, calling Kingston Canadians and Frontenacs games during his time with you?
The guy too, and he came on the road with me a few times, so I refer to him as my bodyguard too a few times. So he protected me even on the road like that. So he was with me from 84, 85 to about 91, 92. Now, a couple of times there in the 80s when he was with me, a couple of times there he served as interim coach for the Canadians after Rick Kornacki got fired that year that he was here. Jimmy went down behind the bench there that year. And also then the infamous story of when he had to take over in 87, 88 when Jacques Tremblay was fired. That was the year they lost the 28 games in a row. They were coming up to the record, which was, I think at that time, 26. And Jimmy didn't want to be behind the bench when they broke the record. So it was pretty obvious that they were going to break the record. Mm-hmm. So we were at home here on a Tuesday night, and we were playing the Toronto Marlies and losing late in the third period. Now, actually, Toronto Marlies get a penalty for delay of game. And all of a sudden, we're just in the booth there at the Memorial Center, just up above the home bench. You can see a water bottle thrown from our bench out onto the ice. And we're going like, what's going on? I look down and Jimmy's right at the ice level, complaining to the referee player, Graham, about something. Graham comes over and he's skating away and he's kind of shaking his head and he's laughing at the time. So we find out later on, of course, Jimmy gets tossed for that. He gets thrown out of the game. And the whole thing behind it was that Jimmy didn't want to be behind the bench coaching when they broke the record. He didn't want to go into the record books as the coaching the team when they broke the record. So it's an automatic 1-game suspension when he gets tossed out of a game like that. And I guess that's what he told the referee player, Graham, and Grant just broke up when he was skating back out onto the ice.
That's one way to avoid the history books in a negative way.
Yeah, and here's the trivia thing for you. A couple of nights later, we were in Cornwall, and that's when we broke the record. Now, who was behind the bench that night when we broke the record? It was Don Gilmore, who was helping Jimmy coach after Jacques Tremblay got fired. Don Gilmore was there, along with one of the owners of the team at that time, the late, great Buck Wager, and also a trainer by the name of Dave McDonald, who we just picked up from Queens, because the trainer that year, Pete Campbell, quit when Jacques Tremblay got fired. Peter packed it in too. So those were the three guys behind the bench on the record breaker.
That's funny. I wonder what the relationship was like between Gilmore and Dory following that.
It was great. They were great. You know, Donnie helped Jimmy out there that time when he needed help behind the bench there, and Donnie was right there for him, along with Doc Wager. And of course, the infamous other Jim Dory story, of course, is when he came up. He'd come up every once in a while to Belleville to help me out there on games there. And he did that night that it went into the 4 overtime game. That he came up that night. And we go back a while ago when I told that story about when he came up there that night. And the game ended like 2 o'clock in the morning. And at that time, I was doing early morning sports on air at 6 o'clock. So I was in the next morning at 6 when the switchboard to the radio station opened up, because, of course, no cell phones at that time. First call I get after 9 o'clock that morning is from Jimmy's wife, Dale, and saying, asking about the game that the night before, what time it ended, because she said Jimmy got home like really late, like in the middle of the night, and he's trying to tell me he was at the hockey game. And I said, well, I don't know what he's talking about, Dale. I was home in bed by midnight. I don't know what he's talking about. But I came clean later and told her that, yeah, I went till 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm sure Jim appreciates you coming clean at some point.
He really appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, you went from a guy like Mark Potter, who knows the game and knows his stuff, to having a guy like Jim Dory, who played pro hockey with the Leafs. Was there a huge difference between how they saw the game and the way they presented it to the audience?
Yeah, Jimmy kind of had the inside stuff of what's going out onto the ice. Also, just a defense kind of point of view, just defensemen out there, how to handle certain guys around the net at that time.
Mm.
And also, his favorite one was, and you could get away with it, I think at that time, was to nudge the back of the helmet of the guy, push it down over his eyes. That was his favorite move. So he said, yeah, he's worked with a few of the guys in practice with the Canadians, and he was showing them how to do that with trying to get away with it. So little things like that. He came up with some stories during games like that that just were great like that. I kind of compared him to Dandy Don Meredith when he was doing the games there on Monday Night Football, although he never did sing Turn Out Lights.
Probably for the best.
Yes, thank you.
So you go from Jim, and then the next gentleman that joined you in the booth was a guy by the name of Dan MacLeod. Dan was a former coach of the Kingston Aces and a Canadian veteran. So you had the honor of working with the Toronto Maple Leafs, former Maple Leafs player, and then you go to the honor of working with a Canadian veteran. So what was that like for you?
Just a super guy on and off the ice. This guy knew his stuff as far as hockey was concerned, working with the Kingston Aces there for years. And just everybody around all the other cities, it seemed, knew him from somewhere along the line. He was supervisor, one of the traveling supervisors of officials in the NHL for many years. So you kind of got that perspective too of NHL refereeing and refereeing in the OHL. When you thought it was a bad call or something, he'd come up with his perspective of it and looking at it from a referee's side of it. So really interesting that way that he came up with that, but just his leadership and just his know-how of hockey at that senior and junior level was just outstanding at that time.
Following Dan's time with you, you took a bit of a break from calling Frontenacs games just for other professional reasons in your career. And then, you can tell some of the story. You can't tell the whole story about how you got back to working with the Frontenacs, but let us know. I believe it was 7 years you were away from the team, but you did end up coming back, and our good friend Larry Mavety had a lot to do with that.
He gave a phone call that kind of changed things around there late that season of 2001. And let's just say that it led to me coming back there in the fall, in September of 2001. So he was very instrumental in that. And always remember that day when I got the phone call from Mav that we couldn't do anything at that time, but then sure did a few months later. And it was thanks to him, I think, in part that, and Doug Springer, the owner of the team at that time, that I was back at it in 2001. I've been back there ever since.
You mentioned an interesting story to me that you were, excited to get back to work in the fall of 2001, but the season started a little bit earlier than we're used to now, and you had to delay that start a little bit because of 9/11. What was the feeling like around the team? I know it's, our neighbors to the south, the U.S., that were mostly dealing with the situation, but it affected everyone, including Canadians. So what was that like for you and going through that right before your return to work, I guess, with the Frontenacs?
Yeah, it was very ironic, I guess. One word that it came around that the first game of my comeback was supposed to be on Thursday, September 13th of 2001 in Peterborough. But of course, because of the unfortunate disastrous events there in New York City on 9/11, that they pushed it back to the Saturday night. So it did get delayed until just a couple of nights later. But that was that same week that everything happened. So that was a very eventful week as it turned out there.
You've been back with the team ever since the fall of 2001, and it's been one guy with you for most of the ride, Paul Watts, a guy I know pretty well now from working with the team the last 3 or 4 years. Great guy, great on air, and I'm sure a good friend to you. He's a good friend to everyone around the building. So talk about Paul for a few minutes.
Yeah, just a well-known travel agent here in the city for over 25 years. He just recently retired here last summer, so he's got lots of times on his hands here now. So But unfortunately, everything delayed here, so he's not with me here at the start of this season. Hopefully, we can get back here soon, but will be in September, I'm sure, when we get back to normal routine then, hopefully. But yeah, he's been back with me ever since that first night. He was with me in Peterborough that first night when we got back into it in 2001. So just a great guy that really knows his hockey as well. He'd been with the Voyageurs forever, doing everything with them before they unceremoniously dumped him there after ownership changed there. And so I picked him up there to get him back into the sport because he just loves being here for everything. And a lot of the local people know him well.
There's a few others that have not been with you full time in the booth, but you've had a few games here and there with that I know you wanted to mention. And one of them, Kevin Walker, is still with the team. He works closely with Chris Cook on game nights downstairs at the hockey ops staff. So maybe explain how Kevin ended up weaseling his way into the booth with you for a road game in Oshawa one night.
Yeah, he joined us a few years ago, and he said that he always wanted to do that color commentator. So he said, one night we'll get you on there, Kev. So sure enough, here a couple of years ago, we did that in a game in Oshawa, I believe it was, and he's helped me out in games in Oshawa and Ottawa on the road where I need a lot of help there when I'm just by myself. So, and he does a great job, came in well prepared, and a lot of people really reacted to that, geez, it sounded like he'd been doing that for years, but that's him. He's well prepared for everything that he does, and just a great guy again there that helps out Chris Cook here. Both of those guys just very valuable to the team, and the hours they put in are just invaluable to this hockey club. And a lot of the usual fans don't know how much work these guys put into their jobs. But Kevin just fell into that, and he's just been a natural on air there. Also, one other guy I just want to mention too is got a freelance writer in the Kingston area, Neil Acharia. He helped me out a few years ago there too. Did a great job as well. Both these guys really well prepared when they come in. They just didn't come in and just sit down and try to act as if they knew what they were doing. They were well prepared for it there. And Kev sure was here over the last couple of years that he's helped me out here. Just a great guy.
Before we let you go, Jim, is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Any names or situations over the years that you can think of off the top of your head? Because I know you got a lot of history with a lot of these guys, and we could probably talk for hours about stories and listening to you tell stories, but don't have that much time. So is there anything specific you want to bring up before we go?
I just wanted to mention to all these guys that just appreciate what they've done for me here over the years. As you well know from working with me over the last few years here, it takes a lot of patience to work with somebody like me. So these guys really deserve a personal and public salute, and that's really the whole reason behind this. A couple of other stories with Major MacLeod I just wanted to get in there too, Jordan, was he had the firmest handshake of anybody around. I think I tried to warn guys when I introduced them to Mage that, yeah, this is Mage and this is so-and-so here. And I tried to warn the guy before he shook hands with him, but Mage was always right there with the super vice grip of a handshake. And the guy later on would tell me, he says, why didn't you warn me about his handshake? He said, I still don't have feeling in his right hand. But just that was from the old military, of course, just great guy, but man, he had the strongest handshake of anybody I've ever met in my life, and in great shape for a guy. He was like in his 70s, 80s when he was coaching still, and we were rooming together. 91, 92, he was an assistant coach with the Fronts there, and we roomed together on the road. And middle of the night here one night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I hear him kind of grunting, and I look over at his bed, and he's not even in bed. I look down, and he's doing push-ups, and this is like 4 o'clock in the morning. So I said, okay, Dan, well, do a couple for me when you're down there. I'll see you at breakfast later on here. Great guy. Yeah,
I'd have to say.
He helped me out one time there too. I was talking about this before we started here, that believe it or not, Frontenacs that year, this was in 92, that they played 5 games in 5 nights, from February 6th to February 10th. We were in Niagara Falls on the Thursday, London Friday, Owen Sound Saturday, Detroit. They were either the Junior Red Wings or the Ambassadors, CompuWare Ambassadors that year on the Sunday night. And we ended up in Windsor on the Monday night. I had to come home right from Windsor after that game, after being away from Thursday on. And I was about the only time this has ever happened in my career here that I was losing my voice, I think, by the time we got to Detroit on the Sunday night. Well, that morning at breakfast, Mage told me, he said, try the old honey and tea routine, just mix the two together. boy, it wasn't back 100%, but it sure helped, and it was back a lot better for the Monday night game, the last game. But you imagine 5 games in 5 nights, that was just crazy.
Yeah, that's something you wouldn't see today for sure. And between just the wear and tear on the bodies and the schedules that the players have to keep with school and whatnot, unless there's a crazy circumstance, you'll never see that again. So that's pretty wild story. What more can you ask for in a co-pilot, though? Holy smokes, bring your voice right back and ready to go for that. Get you through that 5th game.
I keep that up to today in my game here. I don't touch anything else, just tea and honey.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, that's not the same story I heard from others, Jim. So
no, that's just false. What's that? Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Jim, it's been fun, looking back on, and I know you wanted to thank a lot of these guys, and that's a lot of the reason for doing it this way this week. It's a new take, France fans. We hope you like it. Jim, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your stories. I know we've been getting really positive reaction on the articles, and hopefully get that out of here. Holy smoke. You're all excited they had a big win last night. Now you can't stop showing off your sweater.
Thanks, Jordan. We'll see you next week after a couple more wins.
All right, fans. My name is Jordan Jackson. Jim, thanks for joining us. Let us know what you think. If you like the video format, we'll stick with that. And if you prefer the articles, we'll go back to those. But hopefully this keeps you entertained, and hopefully we see you back in the rink really soon. Take care.